It was supposed to be simple, just a school play, a harmless childhood milestone unfolding beneath warm stage lights and fragile paper crowns, the kind of evening that lives only in the small universe of parents clutching programs, teachers whispering cues backstage, and children reciting memorized lines with trembling bravery. It was meant to be ordinary, the kind of memory captured on a phone, replayed years later with laughter and nostalgia. For most families, that is exactly what it would have been. But within palace walls, nothing involving the future king is ever entirely ordinary. The moment Prince George's name appeared on the printed program, something shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Not in the school hall, not among classmates or teachers, but in the quiet, heavily carpeted corridors where meaning is dissected long before the public ever becomes aware of it. A second question surfaced, hovering beneath the surface of what should have been a simple parental decision. It was not about whether George would remember his lines. Not about whether he would feel nervous beneath the lights. It was about the front row. Who would occupy it? Who would be photographed? Who would, by presence or by absence, define the emotional tone of the evening? In royal life, positioning is rarely accidental. A seat can carry weight, a glance can imply allegiance, and a single image can set the tone for months of commentary. What should have been a celebration of childhood began to evolve into something more complex, a quiet test of boundaries, symbolism, and generational authority. Invitations inside the monarchy are never merely invitations. They are signals. Presence implies endorsement. Visibility communicates unity. Seating can subtly reinforce hierarchy. When the question arose of whether Queen Camilla as reigning consort would attend, the matter shifted almost instantly from family participation to institutional optics. On the surface, attendance might appear natural. After all, she holds her position beside the king. But beneath that logic lay deeper currents, shaped by history, perception, and memory. Within hours, conversations unfolded in measured tones. Advisors evaluated precedent. Courtiers weighed tradition against modern sensibility. Protocol favored inclusion. Stability often relies on collective representation. Yet emotion, less codified but equally influential, urged caution, because this was not merely about protocol. It was about what the image would say. In an age where photographs circulate globally within seconds, one frame can become a narrative. For William, the issue was not strategic in theory. It was emotional in practice. Every milestone in his son's life carries the invisible inheritance of his own upbringing, an upbringing shaped by public fractures and private turbulence. He knows intimately how quickly personal moments can become national conversation. He has seen how applause can coexist with strain, how smiles can conceal complexity. A single photograph of Camilla applauding from the front row might have ignited commentary about reconciliation, about unity between past and present, about old wounds finally sealed. Or worse, it might have reopened debates long thought dormant. He has spent years learning how to walk the narrow line between duty and self-preservation. The monarchy requires composure, it requires continuity, but fatherhood has sharpened something within him that protocol cannot override. He does not want his children's childhood defined by layered symbolism. He does not want their milestones reframed as institutional theater. He wants them to belong to his children first, and to history only much later. To him, the decision was not rebellion. It was not a challenge to authority, it was protection. Protection of George's innocence so that applause would feel personal rather than political. Protection of Catherine's role as mother so that her presence would not be diluted by layered hierarchy. Protection of a different emotional legacy, one in which his children are shielded from the kind of scrutiny that shaped his own formative years. Catherine did not need a detailed explanation. She has lived beside William long enough to recognize the currents that move beneath the surface of palace life. Her composure, so often described as effortless, is in fact deliberate strength. Beneath her calm demeanor resides a fierce instinct to guard her children from emotional crossfire. She wanted the evening to remain what it was meant to be, a child's performance witnessed by the two people who represent safety, stability, and love. Her support was immediate, steady, unquestioning. Together, they examined the scenario not as public figures but as parents. They imagined the flash of cameras, the speculation that might follow, the inevitable headlines interpreting every detail of who sat where. They saw clearly how quickly a modest school auditorium could become the backdrop for institutional symbolism, and they refused to allow that transformation. The line once drawn was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no public confrontations. The decision was communicated calmly, framed in the language of privacy and logistics. Camilla would not attend. The explanation would remain procedural. Schedules would be cited, commitments referenced. The palace machine is skilled at softening edges before they are visible. Yet within those quiet exchanges, something larger crystallized. A boundary had been asserted, not against the monarchy itself, but within it. William was defining how his household would intersect with the institution. He was signaling that proximity to his children's lives would be carefully curated, not automatically assumed. Because at its core, this was not about exclusion, it was about authorship, about who shapes the emotional narrative of the next generation, about who sits beside the future king, not just in ceremony but in childhood. And in that decision, quiet, measured, and deliberate, something shifted. The monarchy did not tremble, no formal statements announced a fracture, yet the emotional architecture inside palace walls subtly realigned. The future was no longer waiting patiently for its moment, it was beginning, gently but unmistakably, to define itself. The tension surrounding this decision had not materialized overnight. It had been present for years, quiet, controlled, and carefully disguised beneath the polished choreography of royal life. It lived in measured smiles exchanged during public engagements, in the slight but noticeable spacing between figures on balconies, in the subtle choreography of entrances and exits that only seasoned observers could interpret. To the untrained eye, everything appeared composed, harmonious, unified. But within the monarchy, civility does not always equate to ease. Sometimes it is simply discipline. William's relationship with Camilla has undoubtedly evolved over time. Courtesy replaced early resistance, public respect replaced visible discomfort, appearances were managed with maturity and restraint, yet evolution, however sincere, does not erase memory. Beneath the formal titles and carefully constructed narratives lie layered histories, emotional archives that no coronation can fully dissolve. The past does not vanish simply because the present demands stability. It settles quietly beneath the surface, influencing tone, instinct, and reaction. So when William communicated his decision, there was no theatrical confrontation, no raised voice, no visible fracture. His tone was calm, his reasoning was concise, his conclusion was unmistakable. Camilla would not attend, not this time. The message was delivered without hostility, but it carried finality. Officially, the explanation was practical: scheduling constraints, private considerations, the desire to keep the event intimate. Unofficially, within the echoing corridors of palace offices, everyone understood the deeper implication. A boundary had been drawn. Inside those offices, language was refined with surgical precision. Communications teams worked to ensure the narrative remained procedural rather than personal. Scheduling conflicts were cited. Long-standing commitments were referenced. Every phrase was designed to prevent escalation. The objective was containment, keep the matter domestic, minor, unremarkable. Yet in royal life, even absence can carry more resonance than presence. A missing figure invites speculation. A seat left unoccupied becomes a question. What appeared outwardly to be a simple logistical decision concealed something far more consequential. Beneath the polished explanations, generational authority was subtly repositioning itself. William was not challenging the institution directly, he was redefining proximity within it. The future was not waiting passively to inherit responsibility, it was beginning to assert its shape. To fully grasp why a school invitation could carry such gravity, one must return to the emotional architecture of William's own childhood. His upbringing, though privileged beyond imagination, was marked by turbulence that unfolded beneath relentless public scrutiny. He learned at a young age that the images projected to the world rarely reflected the complexities unfolding behind closed doors. Smiles concealed tension, applause masked strain. Public unity often existed alongside private fracture. The shifting allegiances within his family forced him to mature in full view of the world. He navigated loyalty, affection, and duty while cameras documented every expression. That early exposure instilled in him a profound awareness of symbolism, how easily private emotion becomes public narrative. For William, the memory of those years is not abstract, it is formative. Camilla's journey into the center of the monarchy was neither immediate nor universally embraced. It unfolded gradually, negotiated through endurance, composure, and a slow recalibration of public opinion. Over time, she transitioned from controversy to consort, from whispered speculation to formal recognition. Titles shifted, acceptance grew, yet perception, even when softened, leaves residual impressions. For William, that transformation was layered with complexity. He understands the necessity of institutional stability. He respects the continuity required of a monarchy, but necessity does not silence memory. Stability does not erase lived experience. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II marked a seismic shift in that delicate equilibrium. Her presence had long acted as an anchor, steady, authoritative, stabilizing. With her death, the monarchy entered a more fragile era. King Charles ascended to the throne, and with him, Camilla's role became formally solidified. The institution demanded visible unity. The public expected seamless continuity, yet transitions often intensify underlying tensions rather than resolve them. William, now Prince of Wales, found himself standing at the threshold of inevitability. He was no longer simply a son navigating family dynamics, he was the defined future of the crown. His responsibilities multiplied overnight, so did his awareness of what he wished to protect. Fatherhood sharpened his perspective in ways protocol could not predict. Watching George, Charlotte, and Louis grow under the same global gaze he once endured strengthened his resolve. He does not wish for their childhood to be consumed by layered interpretation. He does not want their milestones reframed as institutional theater. He wants their formative memories anchored in security rather than symbolism. He wants them to experience moments of ordinary joy even within extraordinary circumstances. The crown may define their future, but it need not dictate their childhood. That instinct to shield rather than expose now shapes his leadership. He is not dismantling tradition, he is recalibrating it. And in choosing to draw boundaries around his children's lives, he is quietly redefining how the next generation will intersect with the monarchy. What may appear to be a small decision is in truth part of a larger evolution. The future is no longer abstract, it is being authored in deliberate, intimate choices, one milestone at a time. Within the institution, the divisions were never loud, but they were unmistakable to those who understood the language of power. On one side stood the traditionalists, custodians of precedent who believed that major family milestones required full representation of the reigning monarch and consort. To them, inclusion was not optional, it was structural. Visibility reinforced cohesion. Cohesion projected strength. Every appearance together was a visual affirmation that the crown remained unified, stable, and continuous. In their view, even a school play carried symbolic value. The monarchy, after all, is sustained not only by law but by image. On the other side were the modernizers, quietly pragmatic, acutely aware of shifting public sentiment. They envisioned a more streamlined future, one centered unmistakably on the Wales family as the evolving face of the institution. Public admiration for William and Catherine was no longer speculative, it was measurable. They represented youth, stability, and relatability in a way that resonated beyond traditional royal audiences. To these observers, the monarchy's longevity depended less on strict adherence to ceremonial inclusion and more on careful curation of its future identity. Two interpretations of continuity coexisted beneath the same roof, one rooted in collective representation, the other in generational focus. For Camilla, attendance at family milestones was never a trivial matter. It reinforced legitimacy. It strengthened the narrative of integration into the next generation. Being seen beside the future king's son signaled acceptance not just of title but of proximity. In a monarchy built on perception, visibility is influence, and influence is sustained through presence. Exclusion, however understated, risks suggesting distance, and distance, once noticed, quickly evolves into narrative. Behind closed doors at Kensington Palace, the decision was made with deliberation. There was no impulsive emotion, no theatrical exchange. William and Catherine would attend together. Camilla would not. The discussion was measured, almost clinical in tone, yet beneath its composure lay years of unspoken history. William framed it as a matter of principle. George's night would not become a backdrop for layered symbolism. It would not serve as a carefully staged image of blended hierarchy. It would not be interpreted as endorsement, reconciliation, or institutional choreography. It would remain what it was meant to be, a father and mother supporting their son. To William, that distinction was not subtle, it was foundational. He understood how easily personal milestones could be absorbed into public theater. He refused to allow this one to be repurposed. When the evening arrived, Catherine's presence in the front row carried quiet authority. She did not perform significance, she embodied it. Calm, composed, and unmistakably protective, she required no entourage to validate her role. There were no competing figures, no expanded hierarchy framing the moment. Just two parents seated close together, eyes fixed on the stage. In the soft light of the auditorium, their presence felt intimate rather than ceremonial. The absence of one royal figure, though unannounced, resonated more powerfully than applause. The front row became more than seating, it became a declaration. Catherine did not need a crown to command gravity that night. Her stillness, her attentiveness, the quiet intensity with which she watched her son spoke louder than any title. The Wales family appeared unified and self-contained, their circle deliberately drawn inward. For George, the impact was tangible. Children are acutely sensitive to the energy directed toward them. Confidence is often borrowed from those who watch. That evening, he stood taller beneath the lights. His voice carried more clearly. His movements were surer. The steady presence of his parents anchored him. The applause he received felt personal, warm, uncomplicated. It was not diluted by layered interpretation. In that subtle distinction lay William's quiet victory, the preservation of a child's moment from institutional weight. Elsewhere, however, the atmosphere carried a different tone. At Clarence House, the news had arrived not as confrontation but as omission. There were no raised voices, no ultimatums, no visible rupture. Only silence, the kind that follows a decision already finalized. For Camilla, who had spent years carefully constructing her place within the royal narrative, exclusion from such a symbolic milestone carried an unmistakable message. It was not a public demotion. It was something subtler, recalibration. Titles may secure position within the hierarchy, but influence is sustained through proximity. And on that evening, proximity had shifted. King Charles found himself navigating terrain both personal and political. As a husband, he could not ignore the sting his wife might feel. As a monarch, he could not disregard the institutional implications. To publicly challenge his heir risked visible fracture. To intervene privately risked escalating tension. The balance required restraint of the highest order. So he chose silence. In royal life, silence is rarely passive, it is strategic. By neither opposing William nor overtly defending Camilla in public, Charles signaled continuity above confrontation. Stability once again became the guiding principle, yet even silence communicates something within palace walls. It acknowledges change without endorsing it. It absorbs tension without resolving it. And in that quiet absorption, the monarchy shifted, almost imperceptibly but undeniably, toward its next chapter. When the first whispers reached the media, the story slipped beyond the palace gates and into the public bloodstream. What had been a private boundary between parents and institution was quickly reframed as strategy, as maneuver, as signal. Speculation rushed in to fill the silence. Certainty dissolved. Headlines sharpened the narrative, recasting a father's decision as a calculated power move. Language intensified. Words like snub, rift, and assertion began to circulate with confident authority, as though intention could be measured from afar. Commentators dissected protocol with forensic precision. Some argued that unity required visible inclusion, that tradition demanded collective presence at significant family moments. Others described the decision as emblematic of generational change, a future king quietly redefining how monarchy intersects with private life. Supporters praised William for placing fatherhood above optics, portraying him as a modern patriarch determined to shield his children from institutional theatre. Critics, however, warned that even subtle exclusion risked reopening fractures the crown had worked diligently to repair. The debate was no longer about a school performance, it was about the architecture of royal continuity. Through it all, the palace maintained deliberate neutrality. Official statements cited scheduling complexities and long-standing commitments. The tone was measured, procedural, unprovocative. There was no acknowledgement of tension, no engagement with the swirling interpretations. The strategy was clear: refuse escalation, do not validate the premise of conflict, allow the narrative to exhaust itself rather than inflame it. Yet in a media climate that thrives on reaction, silence can feel louder than rebuttal. Catherine's silence in particular carried unmistakable weight. She offered no clarification, no subtle counter-message, no carefully staged reassurance. In a culture conditioned to expect constant explanation, restraint adds not as avoidance but as composure. The absence of commentary projected confidence. She did not defend the decision because she did not appear to perceive it as controversial. That steadiness resonated. Gradually, public sentiment began to tilt toward the image of a young family drawing clear boundaries around their children's lives. The Wales household increasingly seemed to embody the monarchy's emotional center of gravity. For King Charles, however, the moment sharpened into something more complex. Beneath the procedural calm lay a realization difficult to ignore. The future was no longer waiting patiently for its appointed time. It was asserting itself quietly, decisively, without spectacle. William was not merely rehearsing leadership, he was exercising it. Authority was migrating not through confrontation or declaration, but through controlled boundary setting. Charles could sense the narrative shifting, subtly, perhaps imperceptibly to the casual observer, but unmistakably within the institution itself. The gravitational pull of public focus was drifting toward his heir, and it was happening faster than tradition typically allows. There was pride in that awareness, but also displacement. Monarchies are built upon continuity, yet continuity does not pause for comfort. The passage of influence is rarely ceremonial. It unfolds through moments like these, unannounced, understated, yet definitive. In the end, the controversy was never truly about stage lights or applause echoing through a school hall. It was about positioning, about who stands visibly beside the future king and who does not. A front row seat became more than a place to sit. It became a declaration of lineage, protection, and a subtly modernized interpretation of monarchy. William did not issue proclamations of independence. He simply acted. Catherine did not articulate authority. She embodied it through composure and presence. Camilla's title remains secure, her role beside the king unchanged. Yet within royal life, influence is rarely fixed. It expands and contracts with proximity to the future, and increasingly the future appears to orbit around the Wales family, around their unity, their image, their carefully drawn circle. The monarchy itself seems to be modernizing not through constitutional overhaul or dramatic reform, but through intimate family decisions that quietly signal new priorities. Boundaries are being defined where assumptions once stood unchallenged. Childhood is being protected where exposure once felt inevitable. Private moments are being reclaimed from institutional choreography. And if a single school play could carry such symbolic weight, the question lingers with quiet intensity. What happens when the milestones grow larger? When graduations, state ceremonies, engagements, and future coronations demand broader visibility? In royal life, the smallest gestures often foreshadow the grandest transitions. A seat in the front row became a subtle rehearsal for succession itself. Because futures once declared, even quietly, rarely retreat.